Welcome back to Jesus and His Friends, where we're finding out about Easter. This is episode 2 of 4. Perhaps when you haven't been able to go out much recently, and back when it was a bit cold, you stayed in and played some games. A great game to play in the house is hide and seek, and I've been searching the internet for some of the real champions of hide and seek. Have a look at this. Well, some of those hiding places were better than others, weren't they? Can you imagine playing hide and seek and one of your friends pointing out your hiding place to the person who was searching? How would you feel about that? The word, I think, is betrayed. They've pointed you out. They've given you up. They've betrayed you. It's especially not very nice if you're betrayed by one of your friends. Well, in today's story, that's exactly what happened to Jesus. He was betrayed by one of his friends. Today's story is called Betrayed by His Friend. In episode 1, we saw that Jesus loved his friends. He loved his disciples. He washed their feet. He was going to die for them. But today, in episode 2, we see Jesus betrayed by one of those close friends. Jesus was betrayed by one of his own disciples. One of Jesus' disciples was called Judas. Judas had a job to do amongst the disciples. His job was to look after all of their money. Now, Judas was just like any of the other disciples. Judas had seen and heard what all the disciples of Jesus had seen and heard. He'd seen Jesus heal the sick. He'd heard all of the amazing things Jesus had said. Just a few days before when our story today happened, Judas had seen Jesus raise a dead man to life. But even though Judas had seen how amazing Jesus was, he went to the enemies of Jesus. He went to Jesus' enemies and agreed to betray him in exchange for some money. Judas looked like a friend of Jesus, but he wasn't. Judas went to some of the religious leaders who hated Jesus because they were jealous of him, and he said, "How much will you give me if I help you arrest Jesus?" They paid Judas 30 silver coins, and from that moment, Judas started looking for a good chance to betray Jesus. And so, it was night time. After a special supper, Jesus went with his disciples to a quiet place. He left 8 of the disciples together and took 3 with him, Peter, James, and James's brother John. So how many disciples is that? He left 8. He took 3 with him to pray. 8 plus 3 is 11. But there were 12 disciples altogether, which means one of them was missing. So which one was missing? Judas, of course. Jesus wanted to pray and be alone with his heavenly Father. He had something on his mind. Jesus said to the 3 disciples that were with him, "I am so sad that I feel as if I'm dying. Stay here with me and keep awake with me." Jesus walked on a little further from the other 3. He knelt down with his face to the ground and he prayed. He said, "My Father, if it is possible, don't make me suffer by having me drink from this cup, but do what you want and not what I want." The cup Jesus was talking about was the cup of his death. Jesus was saying that he didn't want to drink the cup of God's punishment for our sin. That's what was going to happen when he died on the cross. Jesus wasn't just going to die. He was going to take on himself all the sin of his people. That would separate him from his heavenly Father for the very first time. But there was no other way to save people. So Jesus said, "Nevertheless, I'll go. I'll do it." Shortly after, Judas arrived in the garden, and with him there was a large mob. They were carrying swords and clubs. Before they got there, Judas had said to them, "Arrest the man that I greet with a kiss." In those days, in that part of the world, that was the usual way to greet friends, with a kiss. It is still how people greet each other in many parts of the world today. And so, Judas kissed Jesus, and the mob arrested him. Betraying Jesus was a terrible thing to do. One of his own friends pointed him out. But it was all part of God's plan. Judas was wrong, and he was responsible for what he did. But God was in control, and it was all part of God's plan to rescue people like you and me from our sin. The mob had taken the disciples by surprise. One of the disciples pulled out a sword and swung it at one of the mob, cutting off his ear. But Jesus said to him, "Put your sword away. If you live by fighting, you'll die by fighting. Don't you know, I could ask my Father to rescue me from this, and he'd send more than 12 armies of angels. But this must happen." Jesus meant it was all part of God's plan that he should die on the cross. Do you know what happened next? Jesus touched the ear of the man who'd been struck, and he was healed. But Jesus was still arrested and led away. So remember, God could have rescued Jesus, but he didn't, because it was all part of his plan. And the death of Jesus wasn't a terrible mistake. It was God's plan to save sinners like us. He was going to die in the place of sinners and be punished for them. Remember, Jesus came to serve. Which reminds me of our memory verse. our memory verse challenge. Can you say these words off by heart yet? See if you can still say it today when I hide some of the words.
Memory verse, memory verse, memory verse, challenge! Memory verse, memory verse, memory verse, challenge! Ah yeah, it's a memory verse challenge, woo woo!
So here it is. For even the Son of Man, remember the Son of Man is Jesus, for even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve. And it's from the book of Mark in the Bible, Mark chapter 10, verse 45. For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve. Mark chapter 10, verse 45. Now, can you still say it? So today we've learned that Jesus was betrayed by one of his friends who arranged his arrest. But we've also learned that it was all part of God's plan because Jesus was going to die for his friends. Okay, here we are in the garden. It's a lovely sunny day and everyone wants to cool down. You can see we've got our paddling pool up and so that's ready to go, but it's in a bit of a sorry state. It's got a puncture, so we need to sort that out at some point. But my friends here, they want to have a little swim as well, and they're all ready to go. They're all excited, and this little fella here, he's taken his coat off. He's ready to go. This fella here, he's told me he wants to go in with his coat on. So which do you think will be the most successful swimmer? Surely the heavier one, the chap with his coat on, is going to sink to the bottom. And surely the one who's taken his coat off, well, he's more likely to float to the top. So let's have a look what happens. Here he goes. 1, 2, 3. Straight to the bottom. That's a shame. Let's have a go with this chap. He's got his coat on. Surely he's going to sink. Let's see what happens. Success. He's swimming. Well, I think I made that clip back last May when it was nice and hot. But the orange in that clip that had its coat or its skin was the orange that floated. Jesus went to the cross to take all our sin off us. If we were oranges, it's like he took our skin on himself as he died for our sin. But Jesus also gave us his skin or his perfect life. Now that's what keeps us from sinking. Jesus covers us in his perfect life, and God thinks of it as if it were ours. Well, come back for episode 3. In the meantime, why don't you have a go at this? Have a go at colouring this in. There's a link below this video for you to download it and print it if you want. Have a go. See you later for episode 3.